Good evening. Thank you for joining us for this exclusive presentation of the KIXC Andy Lands movie, Apart Discussions. I am Miriam Kalmogo, Senior Program Specialist Equity for United Way of Northern California. On this panel, we have Dr. Michael Coyle, Professor in the Department of Political Science and Criminal Justice at California State University, Chico. We have Ebony Higgs. She's the Deputy Probation Officer with Shasta County Probation Department. We have Alicia Settina. She is currently an addiction specialist at Vision of the Cross in Redding. We have Robert Bowman, who is the Regional Director of the Restorative Justice and also the Shasta College Step Up Program Director. Finally, we have Tracy Osterday, Public Health Nurse at Shasta County Health and Human Services. So we have a panel of people who have been working in issues related to what we just saw. And after watching this, I know that if you like me, I'm a mother, so I just spend my time like crying. So I don't know how do you guys feel after watching this movie?
Well, it's heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking. I love the first comment. I think Miriam is the most appropriate one. You sit and you look at all the lives that are being absolutely ruined. Once we recognize that actually drug use is more than frequently tied with addiction, and we realize that we have to transition from this language that we've been given, which is that of criminalization. And we have to really start using different language. We have to recognize this not as a crime problem, not as a criminalization system problem, but as a public health crisis, an addiction crisis, a healthcare crisis. It's about making sure that anything we do is about promoting the well-being of individuals and communities, and start looking to other places in the world where they have actually been doing this for decades, like in Holland, where they are helping people medically, and in Portugal, where they have decriminalized all drugs and the positive impacts that have happened in their society.
Thank you, Michael. Who else wanna share?
I think from a restorative justice standpoint, I think one of the things that the film pointed out is that every individual who has a victim or someone they may have impacted as a result of a crime is usually a victim themselves. Communities make victims as much as they incarcerate. And you can see in the film how that cycle of revolving door just continues with the children, having to go and visit them and be exposed to that environment. And then when, they come back home, they're having to reintegrate. And so I think that it's important for us as a society and as a community to say, how can we work as a collective to try and keep families together while at the same time, enforcing some sense of order. I think that obviously, as Dr. Coyle touched on, we've been doing this for a couple of 100 years and it's just not working. The numbers are still the same, and we're turning out more broken people than we did when we started.
So, Alicia, it looks like you want to say something.
Yeah. So I just wanted to share a little too. I actually have lived that kind of experience as a mother a single mother who, has been incarcerated, and a lot of old feelings popped up and a lot of memories through watching the film, and it was pretty emotional. And it just brought me back to a lot of the barriers that, that we face when we are incarcerated, and then when we come back out into society, and like trying to figure out how to put back all the pieces and stuff. So it was just kind of took me back to what I experienced. And so, yeah, I feel the same as Robert does. Things have to change. The currently what's going on and the way that things are being done isn't working. And we're going to have to get creative and come up with new ways to do things new, because, it's not working, and we have a broken system. And, it needs to change for the better.
Thank you for sharing your experience with us, Alicia.
Yes.
So anyone else? It looks like, okay, Ebony.
So I watched the movie quite a few times, and because as a mom and thinking about that time away and trying to reconnect and wanting to be around them and missing all those important milestones, it's like, wow, as a PO, I see it all the time. So I see the children and the reintegration, and it's a lot of lives. It's not just that parent, it's the next generation or the next generation. And what is set in place is not as effective as we would like it to be. And so there are changes that need to happen. There are services that need to happen, especially for the woman population that is increasing. So I thought the movie was very impactful, and I'm glad that it touched on all those various circumstances that bring them into the system, because a lot of people don't get that.
Yeah, thank you, Ebony.
I think the movie had a great impact, looking at it, because you're making a subject that to most people don't have a lot of education about, substance use disorder as a disease. But instead of just hearing facts and data, what we're hearing is people's personal stories. So all of a sudden it makes people care, and it makes people care about these subjects. And I thought that was a great thing that they did in the film. That I did, like Ebony, watch the movie more than once, and I was surprised every time I watched it. I'd hear one more thing that surprised me, that was kind of shocking. And one of the things, like many things that I heard was when, I think it was Lydia, the woman that has the 2 sons and the husband at home. She said, when I was using the opioid medication, she said, then I went to my doctor and said, I think I'm addicted to these. So what did they do? They kicked her out of the practice. And that to me was heartbreaking, because it was a medical professional that literally did not treat this as a disease, which is what is common knowledge now. But I did see that the movie, they started in 2016 is when they first identified us, the date that they were filming in, and I that must have been before that. So I'm hopefully since 2016 we've seen changes in the way the medical profession is viewing substance use disorder, hopefully.
Yeah, thank you. I see that Tracy and Michael, you both touched on substance abuse being like a public health crisis. How do you think communities should be responding to this crisis?
Tracy, shall I go first? Did you want to go first? Okay, all right, I'll go first then, since I'm here. Yeah, I think we are, as a nation, really ready for a wake-up call. We are essentially entirely asleep. what we watched as essentially this very special torture experiment being laid on these very few women that we saw as an example of is entirely devoid of any logic, is entirely devoid of humanity that we would expect from human beings. If our children behave these ways, we would reprimand them. Here we are living in a country where 1 out of 3 Americans have used an illegal drug. Just in 2018, just in 1 year, the Department of Justice said 60 million Americans had used an illegal drug. 60 million Americans. When it comes to the criminalizing system that we use in the US, that we erroneously call a criminal justice system, because that is not what it is, it's a criminalizing system. It's a criminalizing system because it's targeting. It is choosing who it's going to target to make suspect for these punishments. If there are 60 million Americans a year using an illegal drug, how can we be having a few, 2.5 million in prison for all these things that we call crimes, right? So it's completely illogical and devoid of any reasonableness. Secondly, all the research shows us that the experience of prison, of incarceration, actually makes the problem worse. It makes it worse for the person who's being incarcerated. It makes it worse for the actual society. It makes it work for the family of the members being incarcerated. I'm not suggesting here that as a society, we shouldn't respond to what we call crimes. Of course we should. Of course we should hold people accountable. But as Robert was saying earlier, we have done this 200-year experiment with the prison. Every single report that has ever been issued on the prison, including the very first one historically, says it's an absolute disaster. It doesn't do what we think it should do. And when it comes to a case like drugs, where it's actually a public health issue, it's screaming at us to stop doing what we're doing. It's really time for a wake-up call.
Thank you, Michael. Who else want to add? Robert, I can see you.
I will hop in here. I think that one of the things that we as a community need to determine is what's important to us. What do we value? On one hand, we, as Michael was saying, we're going to lock you up if you develop an addiction problem or kick you out of our practice or what have you. But at the same time, we have an abysmal mental health system where a lot of these folks that are homeless or have addiction issues come from a history of abuse where they were abused by a loved one who was abused by their family. And again, it's that cycle that I referred to earlier. So we as a community have to look and say, okay, how is it that we're going to try to hold folks accountable without giving them the tools they need to be well? Your jail or your prison should not be the top mental health provider in your community. If that is happening, then somewhere along the line, your priorities are misplaced. And so for folks that, develop an addiction, it's oftentimes relates to a physical injury or a mental injury or, something along those lines. And so rather than looking to just punish, we should look to try to restore them. And that's what restorative justice is about. It's about restoring that individual in the community to where they were before, things kind of went awry for them. One of the things that I found over the course of, 6 or 7 years with Step Up is that it costs $110 as of last count, which was a couple years ago, pre-COVID, to keep someone in jail in Shasta County for a single day. Now, if you multiply that by 365, that's quite a bit of money and resources that, are expended on a single offender. Now, turn that, 180 and look at what if we had provided that individual with the mental health services they needed, the treatment, the counseling, the therapy, the addiction support, paying for beds at places like Visions of the Cross, where they can get help and be renewed. Wouldn't that be a better use of our limited resources than simply, throwing them in jail and thinking that we're gonna, give them meds once a day and that's gonna solve the problem.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Robert. Anyone want to add something?
Sure.
Yeah, I would like to. I absolutely agree with you, Robert, on that. There needs to be more of like a preventative too, and we have to start figuring out ways to try and prevent things before they even happen and it even gets to that point. And then if it does get to that point, there needs to be a solution of how to rehabilitate somebody, when they do come back into society. Let's say you do go to jail or you go to prison and then you come back out. I can personally testify that coming back out was overwhelming. And, I was blessed enough to be able to go to Visions of the Cross and go into sober living. And I didn't know where else to go or what to do coming out of a long-term discipleship program, and so coming back out, it was really scary, not wanting to go back to the street life, not wanting to go back to hustling, committing crimes. But then you've got what, 12, 13, 15 years of experience of just doing that, and you haven't been working. You have this huge gap in your employment. You have no education. All of your, what you know how to do is hustling and things that you learn in the streets. And then, you come back out in society, you have felonies. And so it's like huge. It's really difficult to try to apply for your first job. They ask you, questions, and you're like, oh, like, well, let's see here. Where did I last work? Or, it just seems it can be, I'm not making excuses. I'm just saying it can be overwhelming. And, it really takes a lot of dedication and a lot of help in order to continue to keep going and overcome those barriers, And so, and another thing that I'm seeing and hearing, or that I've even experienced myself, is a lot of people will resort to working under the table, even, or and if they are working for people, not being underpaid too, even because they know that you're a felon, and so stuff like that happens too, also. But anyway, that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Robert talked about restorative justice and what role, if any, should the criminal justice system play? What are alternatives to incarceration? Do you have any, something you can add to the restorative justice you talked about?
I mean, the program that I oversee at Shasta College and that Alicia is involved in is exactly that. There's three legs of the stool of restorative justice. There's a community, there's the offender, and there's a victim. And it's, how to bring everybody to a place where they, can be renewed, move on. And again, reform and punishment are two separate things. So Step Up, and it's not just us. Step Up is a program for formerly incarcerated students in Shasta, Trinity, and Tehama County, and I have one student out of Modoc. But Butte College has a program, the River has a program. There's programs all over Northern California and the California Community College system that go both inside prisons, inside jails, as well as having students on campus. So there are alternatives to incarceration. I think the great thing about programs like that is they provide hope. Two, they provide structure and support for students so they're not out there on their own just trying to figure things out when they give them $50 and a bus ticket. This way they're and the thing about Step Up is that we realize that not every student is going to be a Nobel laureate and go to Harvard. There's a lot of folks that love to work with their hands. They love construction. They love, roofing or operating heavy equipment or welding or fixing cars, or even working as an addiction specialist. I mean, so we provide that the ability for them to do that and to pursue their dreams in a way that will keep them from reoffending. And that's the whole goal, is recidivism reduction. And you have to start that in custody. You have to begin that planning in custody. It's not enough to have individuals that are incarcerated simply work for prison industries, making furniture, so that they can profit off it. You have to treat them a trade, a skill. And that's the great thing. There are lots of programs that are out there that are like that. So, I mean, I do see change happening. Unfortunately, it is so glacially slow that it is not where you need to be, in terms of an overall comprehensive program. But there are lots of programs out there.
Thank you, Robert.
I just wanted to say that I really applaud the work that Robert and Alicia are involved in doing restorative justice. I do a lot of that work locally here in Chico as well, and I've been doing restorative justice programs and been working as a circle moderator and stuff for many, many years, and I'm an extremely big fan of it, and we need thousands and thousands of projects like the one Robert and Alicia are running. And the more time I've spent with restorative justice, of course, the bigger fan of it I have become. But I have also begun to appreciate how what we're working with is actually really large and needs an additional approach. What we need, in my view, what we need in society now is a transformative justice approach. And what I mean by a transformative justice approach, if you stop and look at, just in this film, if you stop and look at who these people were that got targeted for participation for their drug use, because there's another 60 million people, remember, that could have gotten targeted. These are the people, this was an example of who got targeted. And we know in general what the demographics are of the people who get targeted for participation in the system. First of all, they are people that are to the 99th percentile from the bottom of the economic class of American society. It is the poor, the economically devastated without access to economic opportunities, careers, education, etc. It is from the bottom of the socioeconomic structure of our society. Secondly, as we all know very well at this day and age, the system highly disproportionately targets people of color to a percentage that's just absolutely mind-boggling, right? 4 or 5 times the amount of white people who are in prison for drugs are African American, twice as many are Hispanics, even more so for Native Americans. The people who are in prison are more than 70% of the time, the things that brought them there are drug related. So this drug issue is actually huge to the entire system. And it's people, as was being pointed out earlier, that are coming with generational trauma of prison experiences. Actually, the biggest predictor of being in prison is having had a parent who was in prison, right? What we need is to start thinking about what do we do about our social problems before we bring the criminalizing system to the foreground, and then add restorative justice on top of that. We need healthcare. We need to be thinking about law not as punishment, but as something that gives us a general sense of direction of where we go. When we see 2 5-year-olds hitting each other, we say, stop, Johnny, stop, Jane, don't hit each other, use your words. Yet when we as adults have people who break the social norms that we have every right to embrace and say we don't want drug use in our society, but we have to respond with behavior that's something more than a 5-year-old behavior. We have to make sure that people have access to economic opportunities, that people have housing, that people have healthcare. These are the things that transform society, which is why I'm saying that transformative justice is what we need. very frequently, last thing I'll say about this is this, very frequently now, when we look at our criminalizing system and we look at the absolute disaster that it has become, we have given police an impossible job. They can't do it. We have given courts impossible number of cases. They now just plea bargain them all out of their way. The prisons do not have any resources. Already we're spending all this money to do anything that would actually help somebody coming out. People on this panel can talk about this better than I can. You saw it on the film. What we need is to do more than talk about alternatives, but we need to start talking about what actually got people there in the first place. And what can we as a society do to help people? Why do we in the US have the highest incarceration rate than any planet on the country? It's nearly 700. And tons of countries have something like 20 or 30 or 40 or 50. What are they doing that we are not doing? What they're doing is they're taking care of everybody. They're taking care of housing. They're taking care of healthcare. They're taking care of providing economic opportunities for everybody. That's the work I think we need to be doing.
Thank you, Michael. Transformative justice. You did touch on the generational trauma that can bring that. Ebony, can you expand on that? I know that you do some work around.
So yes, I do a lot of work with breaking that generational trauma. At this point, everyone should be aware of what ACEs are. ACEs came out, we studied them, and we found that it led to health problems, likelihood to have drug use, addiction, or it just laid out that foundation. And so when we're talking about trauma and the generational, you learn from your parent. Maybe your parent was abusive. And so now you have this child who's trying to deal with that trauma, and then they're abusive, and it just continues. And so we're trying to implement these programs to kind of teach our parents, our families, our children something different. And sometimes we have to intervene. Now, we try to divert and give all these other programs and counseling, but we have to know why this is happening in the first place. So when we're asking someone, hey, what happened? And they're like, well, I just went out this place. No. Tell me what happened in your life well before this. What was going on? Tell me all the way back to when you were a kid, because that's how we're getting to the root cause of why they're here in the first place. Not about being a punitive system, about finding that information, giving those services, and breaking those generational curses. One program, I love it because we work with the kids and the parents. We do parenting classes, and they're like, oh my gosh, why do we do parenting classes? But in those classes, those parents are able to address their own issues, their own trauma, and how it's impacted their children in the first place. How are their children coming into the system? And so that's important. So you have to tackle it at many, many levels and go all the way back to the beginning.
Thank you, Ebony. Tracy.
I agree with Ebony. I just wanted to throw out there, if someone's watching and they don't know what ACEs are, it's adverse childhood experiences. But most people are pretty familiar. But one of the things I wanted to bring up is she's talking about getting the parenting skills and learning, something that is really helpful on a local level. And most counties in California have them now. And in fact, in Shasta County, we have 3 different ones is home visiting programs with either a nurse or a case manager. And so this case management program, what it does is they're aimed at anyone that has experienced substance use, any moms that are either pregnant or have little children. And they usually follow along with the mom, give her all kinds of support, make sure she's connecting to whatever resources she needs, make sure she's getting parenting education, just basically being like a mentor and a friend, and make sure she's getting all the resources that she needs. And these are proven over and over again with data that they're very effective in having a successful family life and less occurrence of substance use disorder or relapse. Some of these women are just at risk. They're not necessarily have had substance use in the past. So that's one of the ways on a local level we can really make a difference. So for people that are trying to look for different programs that they might qualify for, especially women, I created a website. It's called womensconnectshasta.com. And I've listed all the resources that are around supporting any woman that may have issues with substance use or any questions around substance use. So there's a finding help section, and it lists it has a parenting support page with everything listed and what the requirements are, phone numbers, locations. I have just resources for just about anything. I have employment, housing, transportation, pages for all of those different areas. And then if anyone has a question that they don't find that they're asking about that's on the website, they can email me through the website, and then I get back to them as quick as I can to make sure that they get connected to resources they might be looking for. But I'm definitely with Ebony on that one. That's one of the things is so important, is that we address ACEs. We address all the underlying driving factors of substance use disorder. And again, even like Dr. Coyle said, it's, a lot of those driving factors are, poverty and being in circumstances that just, are not for success. So if we can, get people to resources to help them, address those factors, then maybe we can see a little less substance use.
Thank you. So transformative, restorative, preventive. Now we, maybe Alicia might speak. I don't want to put you on the spot, but what would help people who have been incarcerated be successful after a setback? What do you think?
Oh, what would be helpful? Well, I like what Robert had to say about learning new skills. Like that is huge for people who have been incarcerated. You've got to, there's of course transferable skills that, that can be transferred from the things that you do learn on the streets. You just got to figure them out. But definitely like programs like Step Up and other programs, definitely very helpful, because in order to make it and to not go back, you're going to have to learn how to get a job and work and hold a job and obtain some skills so that you can provide for your family, especially if you're a single mom or a single dad, or even if you're not, you're not going to be successful if you're not able to work and pay your bills. Otherwise, you're going to resort right back to what you used to do. And that's usually sell dope, prostitute, whatever it is, whatever your hustle was. And so, yeah, definitely. And that's why I love Step Up so much, because it just really helps individuals who are looking to go to school for the first time, and it's so overwhelming when you first get there. You're like, oh, where do I go? What do I do? I've never even went to school. I mean, for example, I just graduated high school like 5 years ago. And then after I did that, I was like, it's always been my dream to go to college. And so when I first got there, it's like really overwhelming. And I, got sent to go to Step Up. And then that's where I met Robert. I didn't even know if I was eligible, but, he pulled me in and I filled out an application, and right away I made that connection. And honestly, I don't know if I could honestly say that I would have stuck with it and been able to be successful like I am. This is my last semester. I'm getting ready to graduate. I'm moving on to Chico State, but again, I don't know without that support. I would love to say, yes, oh, absolutely, I would have made it. But really, they help in so many ways, like just helping you with your books, financially helping you, you know, all the different barriers, just so the support alone is just amazing. And so like things like that are just so crucial and important. But if there was more resources out there, like honestly, like when I first got out and I didn't know what to do and I was kind of freaking out, like had they had a place for me to just go to, like, okay, if you want to turn your life around, change, like come here and we'll help you. We'll help you figure out a way, you know, to get you started with a job. Cause I mean, I was looking for any job, McDonald's, Burger King, it didn't matter. I really that bad wanted to make it. And I was humble. And so, but just being able to even get a job and start somewhere is huge, but definitely having a place to go where you aren't afraid to be judged because of your criminal history is huge, because a lot of it can be, you know, hard for people to even want to begin to try, because you're like, well, they're not going to hire me. I mean, you know, I've done this and this and this. You have this big, huge, long list and reasons. So anyway, I don't know if that was helpful, but that's my take.
I'll follow a little bit on what Alicia was talking about. First of all, I want to say that, you know, as we touched on earlier, these programs work. Alicia is a dynamic student who, you know, has worked hard, but has attained a 3.85 GPA, was a Minerva Leadership Scholarship winner, the first one in our college's history to receive that honor. So, I mean, programs like ours work, and there are no throwaways. I mean, I think that we talked about adverse childhood experiences. I can tell you, watching the film from the child's point of view, I was that young man in the room playing Nintendo when mom came back. That was me. I had a father who was incarcerated all over the country. And so we traveled from place to place to place as my dad was in and out of the system. So I looked at it from a little bit of a different perspective. I looked at it from the child waiting for a parent to come back and reunite. And so from my kind of perspective, I like the fact that we're looking at trying to find programs that bond children with their parents prior to their release, so that we can be building that bridge. I mean, it was nice that they had a place to stay. You know, there was a family. My heart hurt when that you know, young lady was not able to have her child with her, and their child ultimately decided to live with a grandparent. You know, those are real stories that happen every day in our community, and it's not just incarcerated folks. It's for people that, you know, may have had an addiction or mental health issues or homelessness and haven't been in trouble with the justice system. Those are still folks that, you know, again, no throwaways. We have to, you know, try to reach out for those individuals as well.
Thank you, Robert. We don't have, we just have a few minutes left, but before we leave, I want to ask, what do you think people watching can do to promote change? If we wanna change the system, if you wanna push the system to change, what do you think we can do?
I'll start it off. I'll say a few things. You know, I noticed it was noteworthy to me in one of the moments of the film, the counselor, that really wonderful supportive counselor that had been helping all these women, was asked, you know, what she thought about why all this was going on. And I wrote it down. She said, you know, poverty, racism, discrimination, that's what gets you here. She didn't say drug use. She didn't say making the wrong choices. It's almost as if she's thinking, well, you know, one out of 3 Americans could be here, frankly. So what would that say? Poverty, racism, discrimination. That's what gets you here. So what I think everybody needs to do is everybody needs to be aware of what actually has to shift in our society. What has to shift in our society is that we have to take care of everybody. We have to take care of the poor. We have to work with white supremacy. We've got to, first of all, educate our white brothers and sisters about how dominant it is and how we can start walking away from it. We have to work with how discriminatory our institutions are. Most of what happens in the criminalizing system is done through institutions that are notoriously in violation of the United Nations agreements, who are constantly contacting us about this in terms of our discrimination. That's what we have to do. We have to put resistance up when people start, when politicians very commonly and other moral entrepreneurs suddenly start putting up these labels of criminals and offenders and these tags to make evil people. We have to be mindful of politicians who start using a whole bunch of language to scare us, to intimidate us, to think in certain specific ways, like the problems aren't what the problems are, like the problems are not poverty, the problems are not racism, the problems are not discrimination, the absence of healthcare, the absence of housing, the absence of genuine living wage jobs for everybody. And we have to remember that we have to be brave, we have to be courageous, and we have to vote with that courage to try completely new things. How long are we going to keep on slamming our heads up against the wall with a system that all research shows us is failing us? These are some of the things I would say we can start to do.
Thank you, Michael. So Ebony.
Hi, so I just want to give a little opinion about what can we do. One, we have to get the word out there. Shasta County does have programs for community members to get involved, right? So the education of what is going on in the area, like Think Again Shasta, Parent Network has a program that allows the community members to get involved. It addresses different, I believe it's nonprofit agencies, and it just educates, right? Other things that they have are, I have a list of programs, and the list is a mile long, and we have to have this list because everyone's needs is going to be a lot different. And so we're talking about Shasta County Community Transformation Grant Program and how the high schools have different programs, and spreading the words to those who are coming out are just trying to prevent them, because I think what they need most is that support, and that support will go a long way. But also the diversions and opportunities to get the things they need, the job skills, the education, that goes, I mean, that speaks volumes to success rates, right? So how long can they stay out in the community? Which is phrased kind of weird because, anyway. So another thing that I want to, sorry about that. So another one that I want to comment on, fortunately in the juvenile world, it's not about just the kiddos themselves, right? So we do a lot of work with the parents and their families to continue that work and broaden those horizons. What we see is there's not a lot of programs specifically for women. And I think that someone way higher up needs to do the research and get those programs out there for women who are mothers, are expecting, because we all know the numbers of women who go into the prisons, they're pregnant, or they have kids at home, or their kids are with grandparents. And so getting those programs that are very specific to their needs is very important. So just, I want to stress that.
Thank you, Ebony. If you have the list of information, you're welcome to put it in the chat. We can share that later on. Tracy, I know you have Women Connection.
Yes, it's women's connectshasta.com. And it's specifically to prevent substance exposed pregnancies by targeting all women of childbearing age. So I'm trying to put a comprehensive list of resources that are available in the community to moms and young women Don't have to be a mom, you don't have to be pregnant, and you don't have to be substance using to use the website. I've tried to list every resource that I could, and links, like say dates, phone numbers, descriptions, requirements for each of the programs. And it sounds like I'm going to need to add a few more things after listening to Ebony and Robert. So I'll be adding a few more programs and information on there because I've been wanting to do some updates on it. And I also have I have a couple of pages for family and friends guides with a little bit of education about substance use disorder and how they can feel like they can make a difference, steps that they can take to be helpful. Also, there's information about if someone is using and they don't know they just don't even know where to start. I have laid out like different ideas of things they could consider, like things like getting medical care, things like, considering medication assisted treatment, things like that. And I try to explain the process so it's not as scary. So the big thing is just getting people to go to the website. But yeah, I did it so that anyone that's scared and doesn't want to, come forward, afraid of prosecution or whatever their issues are, that they can go on the website anonymously and find information that they need, and then maybe reach out, hopefully. So.
Thank you. We almost at the end. If any one of you guys has something that they want to share, something burning or something that didn't get to say. Okay, well, thank you, Panna. Thank you for, being part of this discussion. I learned a lot. And as Tracy said, I think I'm going to be adding to my list of resources too. So thank you so much. I just wanted to remind people that the full movie will be shown Monday the 21st, I think. Monday the 21st, that it will be shown at 10 p.m.
Okay.
So please, pass it on. Let people know about how important it is to watch and see, and maybe act after that, like Michael said. And yeah, thanks again, and thanks to KIXC for bringing, this film and discussion into our community.
Thank you, Miriam, for moderating us so effectively, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
For all the great work you're doing. Really appreciate
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
It
you.
was a pleasure.
Yes.